This tutorial is on the production process of putting a storyboard together. So this is a storyboard that I had worked on the Weebles spaghetti days that you saw the little clip, which you'll be doing the thumbnails in the next video. But on this one, I wanted to go through what are the elements that you get and what your responsibilities are and how you piece that together into a storyboard. So first off, you get a script, and this is pretty typical. This was a direct to DVD, but it's very typical of any broadcast TV series that you'd be working on. I worked on quite a number of them, and it's all pretty similar. The Spaghetti Days animation that you see is about 8 minutes long, and for that 8 minutes, you've got a number of pages of script. So it actually fills out 15 pages of script, and that adds up to that 8 minutes. So once getting the script, what I do is, well, read it through, might read through 2 or 3 times, and then start to identify what is in the script. So there's locations, and there's a number of locations in this episode, and a number of characters. So I started going through and highlighting in yellow what the locations are, and there's a number of them. In the clip that I showed, concentrating on the first area or location, which was the Meatball Bowl-a-thon area. And in that part of the sequence, there's a number of characters, so I had to figure that one out. So there's a character called Susie Q, and then there's Diddy, and who else do we got here? Demby. So they're all different characters. And when you go through the script, now there's another location, the slurping station, and another group of characters. And as I go through, it shows macaroni maze, the linguine lasso, and it just goes on and on all these locations. So it's quite a bit. It was quite a complex episode for only 8 minutes for all the location changes and such. The target audience is very young kids, almost preschoolers and such. And actually I was quite surprised. I thought the script was very complex for a young audience. I was getting confused where things were going and what was happening. But this is pretty typical of a script in which it breaks down who's there, where the locations are, and sets you up. For the most part, it's dialogue. And here is in uppercase in the script who the character is, and then below is the dialogue. Same in each section here. It gives you just a little bit of direction notes. It's more, what's the action or what's supposed to be happening. So in this bowl-a-thon, it says Susie Q is acting as the MC at various Weeble setups to bowl. And it says Demby and Diddy hurry over. Susie hands Diddy a meatball, bowling ball. Diddy wobbles into position, assuming her bowling stance. So it gives you some direction here. But it doesn't tell you where the camera is. It doesn't tell you, how to do the composition. It doesn't give you any real performance ideas or even expressions and things. That's the storyboard has to work that out. The storyboard artist has to work that out and decide, if it's when are you going to have a establishing shot, a mid shot, a close up, and how it's going to be one character in the shot, 2 characters, the 3. So it's there's a lot of creativity you have to get into. But initially, it's just going through the whole thing. And, for 8 minutes, there's quite a bit of script to go through and find out all the characters and such. So once you've gone through all that script and highlighting and making your notes and such, now it's going through the design packs. In this one, there is a number of designs of characters. So these first ones here are all characters that I went through the pack and found designs. A lot of the designs here are quite rough. Some are more cleaned up. Others are quite rough. And, in some cases, there wasn't even designs because it was kind of mid-production. So characters that showed up in all the episodes were kind of well established and worked out. Others that were unique to the episode, not so much. So a little bit of working out and, some ideas of some poses. And here's kind of typical, and the initial designs I got were all like this, all rough ones. And when they're rough like that, we call it a fun pack, just an industry name of here's the rough designs. They're not all here, but it get you going. So again, once you got the script and it's been confirmed and ready to roll, you got to get started because you've got a deadline. Designs, well, you work with what you've got and try and figure things out. So here's that same character cleaned up. We've got a front side and a back view, cleaned up back view, size comparison from a back view to another character, fire hydrant. And again, that's kind of the case all the way along. And sometimes you get some close-ups and just some animation little notes and things as well for some of the characters. So not all of the characters in this pack were in the episode I was doing, so I had to figure out who was who and then eliminate the ones and get rid of that really didn't matter, because working on this, we're not familiar with these characters, let alone the toy, and it was a toy from Hasbro. And interesting, I was doing work for Hasbro on another toy line, Major Powers, but this job I got through a connection, and this came from LA in a studio called Film Roman. And that studio is the producers of The Simpsons. So they had gotten the contract to do this direct-to-DVD on Weebles from Hasbro Toys. So they farmed out storyboarding and other elements. So I managed to be working on two different projects for Hasbro, one directly and one through this Film Roman studio in LA. So they're just sending me, faxing me at the time. This is, again, I did this about 20 years ago, around the year 2000, a little before or after that time. So kind of reason why the format on this is a more square. It was standard definition. It wasn't HD at that time. But the process and everything is still the same from then till now. Anyway, there's a whole load of characters that you had to go through and identify and start practice drawing them so you can be efficient when you get into the storyboard. On top of that, in that design pack are props. So these are elements that might animate within the episode. And it could be as simple as clouds and the look and the style of what they're going to be, and all sorts of other little elements here. Here's a ice cream cart, I believe, or a cotton candy cart, I guess. And again, rough designs, not final cleanups. Weeble cake, balloons of various shapes and such. Just a whole bunch of things. And most of these had nothing to do with the episode I was working on. So most of these had little help to me. So I had to go through and figure out, right, what's useful, what's not, and get rid of what I needed and whatnot. Vehicles are considered as props. So there's a whole bunch of Weeble type vehicles that have been used. And again, most of these were not in my episode. I needed a tractor and I couldn't find one. And again, I didn't get all these at once. They were kind of sending these over as they found them, or they're drawn up and they would send them my way. So I'd be, one of the things when I went through the script, I would be trying to locate things. And if I couldn't find things, I had a list of stuff that I don't have designs for these. And this was one of them. I didn't have a design for this at all. This was the tractor in the episode. This is the toy, but I didn't even have the picture of the toy, so I had to make something up in the storyboard. And when I was finished and sent it off, then they sent this, and it was kind of too late. But they substituted what design I came up with what was going to be used in the episode, so it didn't hold me back. I had to meet the deadline regardless. And here is just all the vehicle toys that they use or are on sale and such. Okay, so it's finding them all out and what's going on with those. So that was props, and then next, locations. So got a few of those, and again, not many of these really related to the episode I was working on. Because here's a fire station. Didn't use the fire station. The whole downtown wasn't used. This was out in a landscape field where they had this Spaghetti Days carnival going on. So, I had a few rough sketches, which I don't even have here. I don't know what happened to them. But here are more the buildings in town, and here's kind of that floor plan idea of, the streets here and where those buildings are located, and you can orient as to where the action goes from one to the other. So again, once going through all that, then start working details out. So did a lot of roughs. So yeah, maybe some thumbnails when I first read through, and then started doing roughs. And the first part was at this meatball bowl-a-thon thing. So I'm just kind of roughing out, trying to figure out my compositions, how the characters are positioned, camera angles and things, and doing numerous sketches of some of the same panels, just trying to get used to the characters and maybe what expressions are happening, and how I'm going to stage things, and working up and fine-tuning the composition of everything. So a lot of roughs, and at this point, I'm kind of numbering my scenes, kind of working out how many scenes I'm going to have, and then working out how many poses would be working into those, and just and this is the whole script. So this is the 15 pages, the full 8 minutes. Kind of just before this was the 2 minutes in the sequence that I'm showing at in the first video, and what we'll be breaking down a little later. And now this is going beyond that, going into all the other action. Oh, this is from the first sequence, a little out of order here, but yeah, this is from the first sequence as well, and getting familiar. So there is some camera moves in this. There is a pan and zoom in and things like that, truck ins and such. Again, for this first year, asking that you just do cuts and lock the camera down for each shot. But I was doing some compensation pans of following some action and things like that. But we'll get into that down the road. Okay, so this is the format of the storyboard panels which they use. Every studio has a variation. The one you're using is what kind of standard for Ontario, based on what Nelvana does, 4 panels. And again, because it's a wider format for the HD, this is an old standard definition, the SD. So they had 3 panels in, but it had the same idea. It had the scene numbers, had the pose numbers, it had sound effects, action, dialogue. So, and then, sound effects or any special effects going on, your page numbers, episode numbers. So they, had a lot of the same things that we're showing in our template that you're making use of. And again, I start tightening up some of those, but still rough, and working on some ideas. This was going to be a pan, so it's starting to white out or eliminate the bars on here, so it would be a smooth transition. Not only is it panning, it's zooming in. But yeah, lots of things to work out. So with an episode like this, doing this storyboard, I think they gave me 2 weeks to work on it. So I spent the first couple of days just going through the material and figuring out what it is that I was working on. Then I started doing roughs once I knew what characters I was working on, and even broke that down into acts, from each location, kind of dealt with each of the locations separately, and got used to the characters and what was supposed to happen in that. So I like breaking things down to keep it easy rather than getting overwhelmed with the whole episode. So again, just lots and lots here. So, loads of pages of stuff. And there we go. So that's the whole thing. So from there, then got into doing the final storyboard. So this is where I make use of the light table and such, and start really working with this and really using the dialogue as a guide, and where I'm going to start the action. So here's the storyboard. We're doing the first 2 minutes of the 8 minutes, but this is the full storyboard for the 8 minutes, and it's pretty thick, quite a few pages. And again, you have to do that. And I actually did it in a week and a half to get it in early, hoping I'd get more storyboards for that DVD. But I think I was later in the process and didn't get any more on it. Got this one. But for that 8 minutes, it ended up being 85 pages and 109 scenes of camera cuts going on throughout. So that's not, it wasn't just 109 panels, because there's lots of posing in there. Like this 108 had 2 poses, and as I go through, there's a number of scenes that have multiple poses and things. So yeah, it was probably closer to 250 actual panels for the 8 minutes to draw up. So here's a sequence of 4 poses going on and seeing the character here. So yeah, lots happening. So I'll just briefly go through, the first few pages, and many of that. Here is an opening sequence that I've cut out. I've just gone right to the first sequence of the bowl-a-thon, and that's where we are here. So it's really scene 10. But here's kind of where we start. We have characters bowling here, and we have a setup of the environment, characters bowling, and this character Susie Q. So this is all hand printed out, and everything labeled as such to work out so it's clear. And here's an indication of a truck out, but again, I'm just hoping for cuts that we're doing for these storyboards. So anyways, getting used to the characters. Again, I chose this one to show at this point because we did very simple Peep and those characters, which were very basic shapes with legs and pretty much it, eyes and a beak. This one, I thought, still simple. They're somewhat an egg shape, kind of like Quack, but they have no legs, because Weebles, if you're familiar with the toy at all, it's Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down, so they don't have any legs, so the cartoon version kind of followed that. So they do have separate heads and arms anyways, or wings in this case. So kind of building up in complexity and keeping things simple. So yeah, just the camera angles and how setting up the shots and what's happening with the characters. If you see these panels, hopefully if you watch this video, or even if you rewatch this video and then look at the next tutorial where I stop at each of these panels for you to draw along with, as breaking down that episode and looking at the poses and the cuts and how the sequence was put together from my perspective. It gives you an idea just how closely they followed the storyboard. And that was always my judgment of how well I storyboarded. If I, when I did finally see the episode, and if I looked at it and they followed all my cuts, all my poses, everything, I was really happy that they were happy with what I did and they didn't change things. Yeah, the episode, this one here, this Getty Days, well, the whole direct-to-DVD obviously was a very low budget and is one of the very first CG shows out there. So the 3D characters and such were pretty limited and not too complex. So, I don't know. I spent a lot of time getting expressions and getting things worked out, and the characters virtually are stiff and don't do much. And some of my timing of action, excuse me, like this one here of the meatball bowling ball knocking in to this character with balloons. Excuse me. There we go. Talking too much. Anyway, that sequence is so complicated with the background, and the action is so fast you can't even tell what's happening. So one of those things that I thought was too complicated didn't work. I thought they would intro this scene a little slower and then so you could really see the action. But they cut, boom, and it's gone. And it was hard to tell what was happening a lot of the time. But you can see in some of those background characters, I did kind of generic, there we go, getting close to the end. Oh, a little back and forth here. And this is kind of the end of the sequence that we're working on. but it goes much more beyond that. But you can see some of these characters. I just did a generic egg shape because I don't know. One, there wasn't enough design pack characters to figure out who's where, and I really didn't know who they wanted in these places. There was no indication, so I just put some generic characters down, let them figure it out, since they would have the pre-rigged characters and models, and they could figure out where they're going to place into these placeholders. Okay, so anyway, the process, script, looking at design, character, props, locations, roughing everything out, getting used to where the locations are, and who the characters are, and the action, and also figuring out what expressions and things would be going on. So that, a lot to work out, and doing that all in the rough stage, and then getting that down in the cleanup final version. Okay, so just give you a little bit more insight of what storyboarding for TV production is all about. All right, so the next one is going through that episode that you saw before this and breaking it down shot by shot for you to follow along and do your thumbnails.